through that season, I really realized, okay, I'm going to have to be my own friend and I'm going to have to fall in love with myself. And I remember my turning point through the heartbreak. I started therapy out there, and I just I don't know what to do with my days. I don't know what to do with my time. And she said, well, what are 5 things you like to do? I didn't know not one thing I like to do for myself. And she's like, I think it's time for you to find yourself. And I think it's time for you to figure yourself out. And so that really was the shift that I needed.
What's up, everyone? My name is Taylor Howard, and I am the host of 2 Decades Deep podcast. We are uncovering the depths of our 20-somethings.
What's up, everyone? My name is Taylor Howard, and welcome to 2 Decades Deep, where we're exploring the depths of our 20s. I'm Taylor, and I'm the host of 2 Decades Deep. And if you noticed, there's no one else with me. This is the first solo episode of the season. I've been super reliant on other guests, and they've been amazing so far, but it's time for you all to get to know me a little bit on a deeper level, no pun intended. So sit back, relax, stay a while, because I'm going to walk you through a little bit about myself. We're going to hear a little bit of insight on what I think is deep in the 20s, and then we're going to figure out how and why I started 2 Decades Deep. So a little bit about me. I am from the south suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. Matson stand up, south suburbs stand up. If you know, you know. And I've always wanted to be a storyteller. Ever since I was younger, watching 106 in Park, watching Oprah, that is just something that I've always wanted to do. And I made sure that I set myself up for that. So when I was in high school, I had a show. When I was in college, I got my bachelor's in journalism. I even went forward to get my master's in journalism. It's always been something that I wanted to pursue. And now I am currently a content strategist for a marketing firm. And storytelling looks a little bit different, but I'm still where I wanted to be. So this episode is about finding myself in my 20s, and I'm currently 26. So I am not in my early 20s. I'm now going into the later half of my 20s. So I got a little bit under my belt, but I have so much more to learn. And honestly, this season has been nothing short but transition after transition after transition. And I really wanted to sit down and tell you all exactly what I've been going through and why I even think it's important for 20-somethings to have this platform. So a little bit about 2 Decades Deep and why I started it. So this is the inception of this podcast is really just to highlight the nuances and the complexities of our 20s, both good and bad, because I truly do feel like even though 20s are extremely difficult, extremely hard, there is a lot of fun that comes with that. And I think that I really started understanding the complexities of our 20s when I was a senior in college. And that's where I'm going to start, where I really realized that, wait, I need to find myself. I need to figure this mess out. So when I was a senior in college, like I said, I've always wanted to be a journalist. That is something that I've never wanted to steer away from. I was the one that always knew what I was going to do. And in college, I feel like people change their majors a lot or their passions change. And that's just something that I didn't deal with. And I really enjoyed my college experience, okay? I partied, I pledged, I'm a part of Delta Sigma Theta, I took on leadership positions, and don't get me wrong, I really did have also hard times, right? So dealing with heartbreak and figuring out, am I gonna be with the guys? I didn't know how to flirt. The things like that was really cringe. And I had to walk through that. It was also hard dealing with imposter syndrome and honestly dealing with microaggressions. Journalism wasn't really a super people of color dominated field. And so I really did compare myself a lot. But overall, I really did have a great experience in college. But then my second semester of senior year, I realized, wait, I kind of hate journalism. I don't like being a news anchor. I don't like how fast paced it is. I don't like how put together and buttoned up I have to be. Like, if you know me, you know that I'm very quirky, I'm very spontaneous, and I just didn't like how rigorous and how honestly limited I felt as a news anchor. And so I'm like, well, what the heck I'm gonna do? Like, I went through my whole life wanting to do this. And so I started to have a semi-professional identity crisis. And then, as we all know, 2020, the pandemic hit and we had no graduation. And I felt like my life was at a halt. I was about to graduate from journalism, didn't want to do it. I don't know what else to do with my life. And so I had an opportunity whether I could go be a multimedia journalist in like Florida, somewhere random, or I can go back to school. So I went back to school and I decided, okay, I'm going to give myself one more semester to figure out if I want to be a journalist or not. So I stayed at University of Illinois. A lot of my friends from our undergrad program also went back. I met a guy. And so I was like, oh, okay, I could do this. I could be in grad school. I'm in a relationship. I also this is the first time I lived on my own. So I really did feel like I was having a rhythm. But I'm not going to lie, I did not like my program. And I kind of felt like I was wasting my time. I felt like everybody else really knew what they wanted to do in journalism. I didn't even feel like I was that good at it. And that's a mental thing, right? Like, that's something that I was personally dealing with. I am one to be really hard on myself. So if I like stutter while I'm giving a news brief, I'm like, shoot, I knew I couldn't do this. And it's like, calm down. But that's just how I was at the time. And I still couldn't get over the fact that, okay, I do like storytelling though. So how am I going to be able to blend my passion with a profession that I don't want to do? And so that was really hard for me. I never shook that. But my second semester of my grad program, I did a documentary on Black hair. And I interviewed about 20 women on their experience. And I realized, wait a second, I like storytelling, but this is a little different. Doing a documentary, producing, laboring with the story, spending time with subjects for more than 5 minutes. If you know, being in journalism, you literally interview them in 10 minutes, and then that's the extent of you getting to know them. So being able to labor with people was something that I really liked. And so I was like, wait, I think I like this career. It just may look a little different. And so after my master's program, I just knew I was getting a job. Like, I was one of the types that's like, okay, this isn't going to be that hard. I feel like journalism was one of those fields that it was kind of a dying field, but I also felt like the people in my cohort, the people around me got jobs like that. So I just knew I was getting a job. I'm pretty sure you know where I'm leading. I did not get a job at all. My cohort, my friends were landing jobs left and right. And I was about to move back to from Champaign back to Chicago, and I had nothing lined up. And then I started to get into that field again where I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I like this. I think it's very stressful to have to be in this field where it's kind of chaotic. There's late nights. I just didn't know exactly where I wanted to go with that. And so I went back home, moved back home. Y'all, anybody knows that when you move back home after being on your own, and I had a boyfriend, I had my own life, I was hosting. So going from that to then moving back home with your mother and your father, love y'all down, but that was a hot mess. And I just didn't feel a sense of independence. I was working at a rich township. I was writing newsletters for senior citizens, I think. I was packaging bags and writing letters to the governor, and my friends were working at ESPN and moving across the country and starting their lives. And I just felt like a failure. And I just felt like I didn't do everything I needed to do in order to succeed. And so I remember my sister was moving to Howard that August. So this is like a couple months after I graduated from my master's program. I'm working at the rich township, and my sister she went to Howard University, and we're dropping her off. And I have cousins that live in DC. And they told me, why don't you move here? This would be a good fresh start. You can live with us. And I'm like, we'll see. You know, I really wasn't entertaining that. I had my heart on New York. And there was nothing that I wasn't going to do than to move to New York. And so I entertained the idea, but I let it go. But something about DC actually stuck to me. I felt like, like that. I think I like this little life. Like I had my matcha. I was walking around. I saw the buildings and the aesthetics of DC, and I saw all these Black young professionals, but I still wasn't sold on it. And so once we dropped my sister off, honestly, I just let it go. I like left it. I moved on with my life. I'm still working at the township. I'm door dashing because I'm not making a lot of money. And then I'm also watching everybody achieve their dreams and on social media. And so I got into this really dark rut. And then around December, me and my ex broke up. And that was like the icing on the cake. So me and my mom are fighting. I'm having an identity crisis, don't know what I want to do next. I have a heartbreak. And I was like, you know what? I need a fresh start and I need to figure it out because I'm either going to take this teacher's position that my mom suggested I get. I had the interview to be like a third grade math teacher and I went to school for journalism, or I'm going to take on my cousin's advice and move to DC. So I decided to do the latter. I decided, you know what? I'm just going to walk on faith. I'm a woman of faith. I'm a Christian. And I really believe that if I take this act of faith and I trust God through this process, then everything will work its way out. So I called the principal of the school. I said, respectfully, I'm going to decline the offer. I told my parents, yeah, I'm not getting that job. I'm actually going to move to DC. I talked to my cousins and my parents were pissed. Like, I went to school, got my master's, only to like take a risk and just move somewhere without a job. And so I decided, this is January of 2022, and I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna move. I'm gonna DoorDash in the mornings. I quit my Rich Township job. I was applying for jobs left and right, like crazy. And then I still moved without a job. I didn't know if I was going to have a job when I moved there. And I even DoorDashed for like a couple weeks after I moved. And then luckily I found a job shortly after. But that was a really crazy time. And I'm still dealing with the heartbreak. I'm still dealing with, being by myself. I think anybody that knows when they go through a heartbreak, you literally feel like you're going to die. Like there is nothing more crippling, I think, when you're going through a breakup. And that was my first breakup. And then I moved to this city where I don't know anybody. And so I had an overwhelming sense of loneliness. And I'm starting a new job. And I'm the youngest one there. And I really didn't have the credentials completely to even have this job. So I'm like, wow, I felt like an imposter. Like, what am I going to do at this job with all these crazy, awesome professionals? And I looked up to them, but I just had to figure it out. And so that season was really rough. I'm not going to lie. Living with family that I didn't know that well and just figuring it out. But I think through that season, I really realized, okay, I'm going to have to be my own friend and I'm going to have to fall in love with myself. And I remember my turning point through the heartbreak. I started therapy out there and I just I don't know what to do with my days. I don't know what to do with my time. And she said, well, what are 5 things you like to do? I didn't know not one thing I like to do for myself. And she's like, I think it's time for you to find yourself. And I think it's time for you to figure yourself out. And so that really was the shift that I needed. I went to concerts by myself. I went out to eat. I dated myself. I worked out. And I had times where I would pull up to a bar and be like, yeah, no, I'm going home. Because I was I had too much anxiety around it. But I really did push myself in that season. And I realized, maybe I should reach out to my friends and see how they're doing, because I felt like everything that I was going through was a very isolated experience. But it took me to really talk to my friends and for them to realize, yeah, girl, moving is hard. Moving away from your family is hard. Breakups are hard. And I'm like, maybe us 20-somethings are all struggling with the same thing. And so I said earlier, I'm a woman of faith. And I kind of felt this prompting from God to maybe you should document your 20s. And so I started it. I started a YouTube channel. And I did it for like 2 months and got discouraged because I'm like, don't nobody want to hear what I got to say about my little heartbreak, or nobody wants to hear what I have to say about finding another job or moving to the DMV. And so I stopped, honestly. But I couldn't shake the fact that I wanted to have a platform for 20 somethings. And then I thought, wait a second. If I like storytelling, if I like interviewing people, if I'm also going through the things that everyone is going through in their 20s, why not make a platform that we talk about the realities of our 20s? And so that's where 2 Decades Deep started. I think I called it 20s Talks when I first started. So I was very fueled. I'm the type of person that when I have an idea, I'm running with it. I'm going full throttle. Full throttle? Wait, full throttle. Is that the right word? Full throttle, whatever. Full throttle. And then I'm like reaching out to my friends, and I reached out to one of my line sisters. Her name is Victoria, and she's also in the media space. And I was like, hey, I got this awesome idea. It's called 20s Talks. We're going to talk about our 20s. And she's like, okay, cool. What else? Like, what else? How are you going to execute it? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead. And then she told me, hey, I have someone you should talk to. She's like, Anwar from college. And I'm like, Anwar, like, that's crazy. I forgot that he was a producer. Like, Victoria was giving me insight about what he was doing, that he was a producer. And then I connected with him. So mind you, I'm really confident in my idea, right? And I'm just expecting like everyone to just buy into this idea that's not yet established. So I get on the phone with Anwar and I'm like, hey, so this is 20s Talks and we're going to talk about our 20s and all this stuff. And he's like, cute. So what about social media? What about this? What about that? And I was like, yeah, I didn't think that far ahead. And he's like, hit me up in about 2 months. Like, figure it out. Figure out exactly what you want to do. And I was like, what the heck? Like, you don't believe in this? And that's not exactly how it went. But it's just when you are betting on yourself and when you are trying to do things for the first time, you have to understand that you got to come correct. And so I really sat down and thought about what are the gaps in Gen Z? What are the things that we struggle with? We're social media. We're the first generation to all grow up in a digital world. So how am I going to reach Gen Z in that way? Who do I want to target? And then 2 months later, I circled back with Anwar and he was like, all right, now we talking. And so that's really when we started the production. I also worked with this girl named Karina, and she is a graphic genius. She has such a lens for creativity. And Victoria helped with the inception of the podcast. And so we just figured it out. We didn't have a budget. We didn't have a plan. We didn't even have guests at the time. But I just knew that we were going to figure it out. That's just my personality. And even now, as we are, 6 episodes in, we're still figuring things out as we go. But honestly, it's been a chaotic ride, and I've learned so much about myself in my 20s. And it's been really cool to hear other people's perspectives on how they live life and how they do their 20-somethings. And we talk about mental health. We talk about relationships. We talk about finances. And those are things that I really shied away from, things that I was really insecure about. But I think this is mutually healing for me and mutually beneficial for me to have people on this platform because we are really figuring it out together. This episode is sponsored by Mason Day Vibes. We all know every scent carries with it a story that freezes a moment in time, and Mason Day Vibes does that for me. This room fragrance line not only smells amazing and provides luxurious quality, but it is non-toxic, sustainable, and natural. Whether you are in the mood for a peaceful getaway or an energizing atmosphere, these room sprays take you on a journey, just like your 20s. Use our discount code TDD20 for a 20% discount. All right, so this wouldn't be a 2 Decades Deep episode without our segment. We usually do Is It Really That Deep? We usually do Let's Go Deeper, but there's no one else I'm going to talk to. So I'm going to talk to myself and I'm going to talk to y'all. And this segment is called what's deep to me. So I am picking out of this hat very randomly. I'm not going to skip any questions, and I am going to give my insight on the topic. So I'm going to start with this one. Moving out post-grad. So I talked about this a little bit, and I will also say I was really fortunate enough to have family, right, when I moved. So I know it's not easy to just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to get up without a job, without any plan, and just figure it out. I know that there's a lot of financial barriers. There's a lot of circumstances that can prevent someone from moving out post-grad. But I will say that moving to a new state has quite literally changed my life. I was one that was really sheltered, and I was one that was really dependent on my parents, and I didn't really find a sense of identity. And it really took me to move to another city to where I didn't know anyone to really find myself. And so I really do think it's really deep to move out and to find yourself, especially as a woman of color. I think we are kind of, how do I word this? We are kind of in a space where we find a lot of identity by who we help, and we find a lot of identity through other people. And moving out was the first time where I really found my identity outside of accolades, outside of what I'm accomplishing, outside of who I'm affiliated with, who I'm tied to. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to find yourself. So I think moving out is deep. I think everyone should experiencing moving out before, whether it's with a roommate, whether it's with family, or whether it's moving out and being on your own. I think it's really that deep to move. All right. Partying and social life. I think it's, okay, partying is medium deep. Social life is really deep. So partying, I was a partier in college. I had a time. I really enjoyed that season. But as a 26-year-old, I don't know if I care to party like that. I'm good for a good dinner. I like going hiking. When I moved to DC, I found a lot of cool hobbies like salsa, dancing, and what else? Running club. I do solid core. And so those things were really fun and fueled me. I do think that everybody needs a good night out. I think everybody needs to have a good time, but I don't know if partying is that deep. Now, your social life, I do think is important because we spend the majority of our time at work. We spend the majority of your other time sleeping. And so those areas and those pockets of finding hobbies, finding what's best for you, finding what's fun for you, I think is really, really important. So I do think it's medium deep. All right. Let's see if I can open it. Vulnerability and relationship. Okay, let me unpack. Vulnerability, I think, is important, and it's a way to connect with other people. I think in the Black and brown communities, we were often taught to keep everything to yourself and nobody needs to know your business and be strong and all that. And I think that's true. Not everybody needs to know your business. But I also think vulnerability allows you to connect on a deeper level with people. However, I struggle with this because I just like word vomit. Like I will tell you everything. Like, do you want to know my deepest, darkest secret right now? We just met. But I feel like there is a level of comfort that needs to be built in order to unlock vulnerability. I think that there are levels to it. I don't think it's just one size fits all. But I do think it's really important that you challenge yourself and be honest with people about where you're at. And that's as simple as, instead of saying, how are you doing? And everyone's like, fine. I think you could say like, hey, like, this was a rough week, but I'm pulling through. I think that's like a subtle way to be vulnerable. So I do think it's levels to it. I don't even know if I could say it's deep or not because it's a spectrum. All right, I'm going to do like 3 or 4 more. Ghosting. Okay, I've done this. But I do think that it's deep in a bad way. Like, that's mean to ghost people. And I've done it. And I've been ghosted several times. I think especially in dating or just you just get over people. And I think that that's really deep in a bad way because we go through a lot on the day to day. Like I remember one time when I first moved to DC and I was like, let me get out, like let me meet people. And I was on an app and I reached out to, we were talking, we had plans to meet up. I'm like, yay, friends, connection, people. Because I told you I was always by myself. And I'm getting ready. I'm on my way. And I'm like, wait a second. We have not established what time. And so I'm reaching out, ghosted. And that really did discourage me because I'm like, dang, I didn't even want to date for real at that time. But I was like, I just want to meet people. And the fact that I got ghosted was hurtful. I also remember times where I would be connecting with people, I think in college, and they would just stop texting me. Like we would be kicking it and they would stop texting me. I just feel like that's lame. Honestly, it's lame. I think it's immature. I think if there's not any like safety issues or you feel weirded out or you don't feel good, like if it's not settled in your spirit, I think why are you ghosting people? But that's just my perspective. So I do think it's deep in a bad way. I'm doing a few more. Self-care. I think self-care is deep, and I think a lot of us have recognized that self-care is really important, but I think it's important to think about it not only from like getting your nails done, getting your hair done, or going to therapy, but also it's doing like introspection and figuring out, why do I do the things that I do? Why am I like this? Why do I get anxious when this topic comes up? Or why do I get emotional when I hear about this certain topic? And so I think sitting with myself is the best form of self-care, is to really labor with yourself. I think we can labor with other friendships and we can put a lot of effort into other people, but putting effort into yourself and figuring out why I think the way I do is something that's often overlooked. And so I think self-care is deep, but I think it's more than just taking care of yourself physically. I think doing the mental and inner work is also a form of self-care. A few more. Going 50-50. Okay. I think it's deep at first. I think going 50-50, and this is such a trending topic right now, of like, should a man pay for everything, or should a woman pay and show that like she cares about him? And I've been on both sides where someone has paid for me, and then I've been on the side where they're like, you want to go Dutch? And I don't know. I feel like it's an investment. If you want to work out and if you want to unbig your back, you're going to invest in a gym. You're going to pay money. You're going to get that meal plan. You're going to work hard to lose that weight or to get your fitness goals. I think it's the same thing for dating. You need to invest in it. So if you ask me on a date, I would like for a man to pay at first. I am not the type that thinks that a man has to pay for everything. I think there is a time and a place where you can return the favor, or maybe I don't pay for this, but I'll do this. But I do think it's deep at first. Ladies, don't go Dutch. I've gone Dutch and it sucks. At first, like, I think I didn't feel pursued in that way. And so I do think that it is that deep at first. But like I said, I'm not married to the idea that men always have to pay all the time. But I do think it's important, and there's a level of pursuit that is needed, or there's a level of courtship that is needed for you to feel empowered in dating and feel confident in the person that you're with. So that's my 2 cents about that. Work-life balance. This is super deep, like super deep. I talked a little bit earlier about partying and your social life and how maybe partying may not be that deep, but having a social life or having things to do outside of work is really important, right? You spend about 8 hours at your work and then 8 hours sleeping. So there's not that much time throughout the day to really do you and have your own hobbies. So I think it's really important. Something that I started to do when I graduated, when I moved to DC, is I took salsa lessons. I'm in a district running club. I do happy hours. I did solid core. So I've picked up a lot of hobbies since I've moved, and it has literally refueled me. I think work is hard enough, and to have an outlet outside of work is really important. And you need a life outside of work, right? Like my parents, they lived, breathed, slept work. And one thing about Gen Z is we gonna have a boundary when it comes to when it's time for us to get off. So I think it's super, super important to have a life outside of work. And that changes throughout your season of life. Like there's sometimes I'm grinding, I'll pull in those extra couple hours, but then there's sometimes I'm like, no, I'm having a hard cutoff at 5, and both are okay. All right, lastly, exclusivity in a relationship. I feel like I could take this so many ways, but I think when I think of exclusivity, I feel like other people know that you are in a relationship. I've been in situationships where people did not know we were talking. I thought everybody knew we were talking, but it was not a mutual thing. I feel like exclusivity is really important. It's really deep because I want to feel confident in a relationship. I want to feel like the guy that I'm with wants to be with me. And I think a way to show that is through exclusivity. I want to be able to be shown around and having my arm around him. Like that's important. Now, I don't think that social media, like we don't need to be couples goals every 5 seconds on social media. I think that's a little nauseating, but I do think that it builds a lot of confidence when you are exclusive. So that's just my 2 cents. But that was kind of fun. That was a vibe. I hope you all enjoyed that. So we've talked a little bit about my past and how I started 2 decades deep. I think it's really important to talk about where I am now. So I'm 26. I feel like my 20s have been ebbs and flows and transition after transition. And it's been really challenging, but I've found a lot of sweet moments in the chaos. And I feel like in this season, this is exactly where I need to be, right? Like, I think my early 20s were filled with me not understanding or me even grieving the fact that my life changes so rapidly. But now I'm learning to embrace the chaos. I'm learning to ride the wave. I'm learning that these moments, the moments where, you know, I had to pick up multiple jobs to start 2 decades deep, like I didn't have funding for it, or those moments to where I felt lonely or I'm trying to find community and I can't figure it out. I feel like in those moments, though, birthed creativity. It birthed another side of me. It birthed so much more than I ever thought it would be. So what's next? I have no idea, but I'm learning that it's okay to not know the next step. It's okay to not know how I'm going to make it through this hurdle or how I'm going to accomplish this goal. There's value and there's a safety actually in not knowing what's coming next. And you learn a lot about yourself. You build stamina, you build strength, and you come out on the other side. Like you always overcome it. So this is the conclusion of my solo episode. We have a couple more episodes left for season 1, but I hope you stick around with us in the journey because we're going to have a time, okay?